Hi, welcome to Get Used to It. I'm Sheila Kuehl, and I'm leading you through the maze of all the conversations that we have and that we have had for the past dozen years, and we're going to have for the next century, who knows. Today I have a gathering of three of my favorite people, and if you've watched the show, you know that they always make for some of the most interesting shows because we never exactly know what we're going to talk about. But this is our first show of the new year, and if you're watching it in rerun, I won't say which year, but you'll probably know from what we're talking about. Generally, at the beginning of each year, the governor of each state gives a state of the state. But since we don't have any gay governors that we know of, we don't have any state of the gay state. So I thought perhaps we would have a conversation today about how our community's fitting in with the rest of America, what we're thinking, what we're doing, what they're thinking, what they're doing, and that's about all I know we're going to talk about. So my guests today, Tori Osborne, who at the moment is still a senior advisor to the mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, or if you're watching it in a rerun, she's on to her next career, writing a new book and being a consultant. I don't know, but you know, she was the executive director of the LA Gay and Lesbian Center, of the Gay and Lesbian Task Force nationally. Just a long life for such a young person. Welcome, Tori.
Thank you, Sheila.
I think that was good. My guest today is also Phil Wilson, who I didn't even check with him what his title is anymore, but he is the executive director of the Black AIDS
Institute.
I knew it wasn't a project. I knew it was more bigger and important but it's a national organization, and Phil, of course, has been our resident expert on HIV/AIDS issues, both scientifically and kind of politically and socially, but way beyond that, because he's been an activist in our community for most of his life, and we welcome you, Phil.
It's good to be here.
And my third guest is Michael Kearns, who is, I guess, you'd have to describe him as a performance artist, but that would be like calling a Porsche a car. You know, I mean, it's just so much better than that, because he's a provocateur, a commentator, an author, just a creative force, not only in California, but around the nation. Welcome, Michael Kearns.
Thank you.
So I hope you all feel well introduced. Tori, I'm going to start with you. Speaking of your writing a new book, I was thinking about the book that you wrote a few years ago.
And dedicated to you.
Which you dedicated to me, and I hope you will the next one, and the next one, and the next one. You know, what are friends for? Called Coming Home to America. And it was a wonderfully, I think, thoughtful book about not only the place of gay and lesbian people in America, but how we as sort of perennial outsiders, perennial almost immigrants in our own country, were taking our place in institutions in America. And over the past years, everybody thinks, well, here we are, we're just so well integrated. What's the problem? But as you see this new year unfolding and how we've come, not only as a movement, but as kind of as a people, what do you think about our place in America? Are we perfectly integrated? Do we still have some, I don't know, insider-outsider issues?
Well, I think it's an unfinished revolution, but then again, I think the whole project of democracy, of gender, of race, are unfinished revolutions in this country and the world. I guess I would say that if you look at, there was a poll that came out recently. I think there's some real generational issues. I mean, the first thing I would say is I think the front line of the revolution is family, children. The most energy to me still comes from LGBT youth and their impact in terms of the organizing. You know, the number of gay-straight alliances being formed, the GLSEN chapters, the gay parents groups, the kids of LGBT parents groups. So I think there's still a lot of vibrancy at the family, on the family issue is kind of a piece of the cutting edge. You know, the revolution's happening around in the PTA rooms and so forth. But I guess I'm struck by how gay youth, LGBT youth, represent are really part of a larger generational shift that's happening that isn't just about LGBT youth. The polls, there was recently a Pew, I think it was a Pew poll, it's a very, very respected generational poll that showed not only what we've seen on gay issues, which is that, you know, we just have to wait for the older generation to die off, and then, you know, because everybody under 40 supports marriage equality or anything else that has to do with our rights, but that young people's entire view of the world is different. They believe in government, they believe in service, they believe in social change, they want purpose in their lives, they want, I mean, they kind of want it all, which is part of being young, but they want, you know, spiritual purpose, and they want careers, and they want family, and they're completely comfortable in a global, in a multicultural world. They're completely comfortable with, you know, T as well as the L and the G and the B, and it's a different worldview. I mean, and so I don't even know. I mean, I would say that we're still outsiders. There's a lot, but I would say that it's not, I would say that to me, I mean, you know that for the last decade or so, I've felt as if for me, the issues that have stirred the passions of my heart are economic justice and environmental degradation. And I think that the climate change and the shifts in what globalization has done for the distribution of wealth and access to power, and therefore to political power, the gap between rich and poor, the growing you know, immigration issues, all of which are connected to the impact of globalization on indigenous economies, and just the entire shift, economic shift, and the destruction of the planet are front and center. And what I see among LGBT youth, and I mean anybody under 40, I'm not just talking about the kids, but is I mean, you know, I have been accused of being a Pollyanna before. You're the one who pointed out in preparing for this show that I'm the one that used to say the 90s are going to make the 60s seem like the 50s. And then it was, okay, the nadas are going to make the 60s seem like the 50s.
And we're still in the nada, so you haven't been proven quite wrong yet.
That's true.
You know.
Well, I think the nadas may still make the 60s seem like the 50s.
This year,
Well, so
won't
far
we?
the nadas look like the 50s.
Well,
At the moment.
in some ways they do, and in some ways it's even worse. And in some ways it's, and in some ways, I will say this again, you know, accused of being the Pollyanna for the third decade, that I've been hoping this would come around again, this kind of, but I really do feel, as we go into 2008, and I'll name the year, is that there is a stirring out there that is unmistakable, and I think it's been building. You know, people, in this consumer society, we act as if these things just kind of happen and then they're gone, but, you know, the everything from the nonpartisan voter registration efforts that reached whole new segments of the non-voting public. I mean, 40% of American electorate does not vote in the presidential elections, let alone the state senate or local elections,
Right.
or so forth. And I think that what has been, you know, and I say this, and it's a tenet of faith on my part, and I don't know how true a prophecy it will be, but I do believe that the old institutions are completely bankrupt for taking care of people's needs and for organizing society in a way that helps human beings grow, thrive, let alone get their basic needs met. And that the old ideologies are completely bankrupt. The right is bankrupt for all the reasons we know about. Inequality just ain't gonna fly. The human beings yearn for, you know, freedom, for a better life, for something better, for the kids, if not for themselves. And that is one of the greatest truths of all time. There's always a hunger.
But some of the institutions that I think are seen as bankrupt, don't you feel that some of them have been sort of throttled? I mean, in the sense of, you were saying the new generation actually believes in government.
Right.
And I think that they have come to understand that policy is sort of developed maybe outside of government, and we can certainly talk about that, because we've all participated in that, but somehow to make it all work for everybody, you've got to take government back, I think is what
Well, you
they've
have
been
to
saying.
take government back, but you have to fund government. And for
Right.
30 years, I mean, this is my takeaway after 2 years on the senior staff, you know, in the cabinet
City of LA.
at the City of Los Angeles for Mayor Villaraigosa, this brilliant, you know, bold, progressive mayor in an urban city, but there's no money. There's no money for potholes and cops, let alone for a green agenda or for investing in economic opportunity for people coming back from our ridiculously overcrowded prisons. There is no money in California in local government, and in California there isn't even the ability to raise revenue if you want to. So what the old formulas are gone. I'm not saying that all the old ideas are bad. It's power and solutions are distributed differently. You have a much more robust, if struggling, nonprofit sector. You have, you know, foundations that have much more private money, but they don't have as much money as government. You have you have underfunded government where the war in Iraq gets $250 million a day, but we can't get enough money for any program in the city or in the state. You know, you're dealing with a state budget. My
Right.
point here is, in the old days, a good idea, a social movement would come along. A good idea would happen. A nonprofit would pilot it, government would bring it up to scale. And so social movements petitioned government to kind of redistribute opportunity, or whether it was money, mostly money, and you had more and more government money. That isn't true anymore. So solving big social problems is going to have to be totally more complex, you know, partnerships and so forth.
Well, we've
and
talked about-
LGBTs will be part of it, but the problems that we approach will not be just our problems.
Well, we've talked about how government, to some extent, by being shrunk by the right wing, has sort of devolved a lot of those responsibilities, and frankly, without helping with any funding, onto nonprofits, like, you know, when you used to run, and frankly, Phil,
When he
you
currently
still
runs.
are. And in the health arena, it's been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking as well, with everybody saying, oh, HIV/AIDS, you know, that must be kind of over because we've got all those good drugs and it's just fine, isn't it? How does it look from your area?
Well, you know, it's interesting that I think that as I joined, you know, Tori's bandwagon for a second, and being Pollyanna, that I do think that we are in a new place. Now, I think that the old paradigm of the way that we were behaving as Americans have changed. And I think that what we're experiencing now, that Americans, we are beginning to envision ourselves in the way that we want to be. And I think we've always wanted to be this way, that we've always wanted to be a more magnanimous people. We always wanted to be a people that believed that there was a place for all of us and that we actually were all in this thing, you know, together. That's not the way we've behaved now, and I'm not sure that's who we are yet. But we are daring to want to be those people, and I think we see that in a number of ways. Some of it is driven by young people, absolutely, but some of it is driven by a fatigue of being afraid. You know, we don't want to be afraid anymore.
Fear
you know?
fatigue.
Right, exactly, fear fatigue, you know, and we don't want to be afraid anymore. We want to be bold, we want to be proud, we want, you know, to be excited about life, we want to be gracious, we want to be generous, we want to be all those things, and we see that everywhere we're going. And to your question, you know, clearly, you know, over the last few years, you know, our government, you know, has abandoned us. You know, the phrase around, you know, institutional bankruptcy, what I would suggest that, you know, I think often when people talk about our institutions being bankrupt, they're talking about moral bankruptcy. Well, in fact, particularly when we're talking about government, we're actually talking about the real word about bankruptcy. We're talking about the economic bankruptcy.
Right.
Now, and I think that what is happening all over this country, and it's certainly happening in the LGBT community, and it's absolutely happening in, you know, people of color and especially, you know, black communities, is that what we've come to understand is that there is a role for government to play, and we have a right to demand that our government play that role, and we have a responsibility on all sorts of fronts to get us there. What's happening, I think, in the nonprofit sector is that we actually have taken on the burden of doing a lot of both the creating and the mending of the safety net. Now we have a health safety net that is in complete tatters, and we're kind of maintaining it, being the safety net as we knit it along, if you know what I mean, and that is certainly true with HIV and AIDS. Today, the AIDS epidemic is absolutely active. It is a major issue. It's not the epidemic that it used to be, and in some ways, it is a more difficult and certainly a more complex epidemic to deal with. And particularly in black communities where, you look at the AIDS epidemic in America today, and African Americans represent 12% of the U.S. population, and yet we represent 50% of the estimated 1.2 million Americans living with HIV and AIDS. We represent 40% of the new cases among men. We represent 63% of the new cases among women. We represent 67% of the new cases among infants, and we represent 70% of the new cases among adolescents. Among some populations in America, we have an AIDS epidemic that outstrips anything that you see in sub-Saharan Africa. I just got back from Cameroon and from Nigeria. I spent a lot of time in South Africa. Among black gay men in America today, in urban settings, it's estimated that nearly 50% of them may be already HIV positive. There's no place on the planet where you see AIDS rates approaching 50%. So there's a huge problem, and a lot of what has happened now in kind of pretending that it is over is driven out of kind of desperation and knowing that there's not enough resources to deal with it anyway.
We had the same thing when we looked at just a bill that would allow the distribution of condoms in prisons, because everybody wants to pretend there's no sex in prisons.
That's right.
And yet, it's not the only place, of course, where AIDS would become, transmitted. But it was just like, what world are you living in that you won't at least give this a chance?
Well, it's what I call the Alice in Wonderland school of policy, where we believe what is isn't and what isn't is. And that kind of drives so much of what our policy has been. But in the spirit of this show, I guess the thing that I am so jazzed about is that as I travel around this country in LGBT communities and in other communities, that is not where we're going to be. And I think it's even broader than not where we want to be. It's not where we're going to be. There was a comic, and I believe it was today's, maybe it was just yesterday's LA Times, where there's a polar bear. And he says, my environment is melting away. And then there's another polar bear that says, well, now you know how Republicans feel. From my lips to God's ears. But I certainly think this kind of paradigm and culture of fear and fear-mongering, that day is over. And I think Americans all over the country are manifesting that change. And I think that, among others, the benefactors of that is going to be the LGBT community, because so much of where we are and so much of how we survive, just period, is by refusing to be fearful. Now, you come out, not because it's not scary and not because there's risk, but you make a decision that I refuse to be in that place. And it's that fundamental decision to refuse to be in that place that has allowed us to survive. And through that, America now has a lot that they can learn from us.
Well, it's interesting. You often see the attitude, or at least somebody trying to catch sort of the attitude in the arts. What are we going to see? What movies, what plays, what music are we listening to? And rather than seeing it get more and more optimistic, it feels to me like over the past several years there's been a very dark image. Now this may be, they're not catching up yet, but Michael, you're a resident artist and sort of finger on the pulse of those things. I could be completely wrong. What do you think?
Well, I want to weigh in as another Pollyanna because I don't want
Okay, that's unanimous then.
Yes, exactly. And Pollyanna played the glad game, where no matter how dire the situation was, she would find something to be glad about. And I think I've by and large, played that game my entire life since I first saw the Glad game depicted by Haley Mills in Pollyanna. I think things have become very dark artistically. I mean, there's a lot of, this sort of vogue of the Western and the shoot 'em up and the violence. And, I have a 13-year-old. So we're in this constant kind of friction about what can she see and what can she not see and what can she, and everybody's rating system can't be the same. My kid can certainly see some R-rated movies that other kids couldn't, and then there are certain R-rated movies I wouldn't let her see. There's some PG-13 movies I'd rather she not see. Mm-hmm. But the violence issue is of great concern to me, and I think that obviously we live in a world where violence reigns. I mean, there's war at every corner in every part of the world. So how could we not be influenced by violence, and how could we not be influenced by that pervasive darkness? I want to talk a little bit about just the idea of America and identity in terms of LGBT youth and some of the things that Tori and Phil said. I no longer feel that being an American is any more of an identity to some degree as being gay, lesbian, transsexual, or bisexual because of the internet. Mm-hmm. The internet has given us access to a world that is so much greater than the confines of the United States of America or our own little backyard neighborhood that we live in, whether that's West Hollywood or New York City or the Village or the East Village, so that we now have this artistic outpouring that is no longer what one could call mainstream. YouTube is mainstream for the youth. Mm-hmm. I mean, Tia will bring me into her room and say, "Hey, Dad," she's 13. "Hey, Dad, come look at this." And then she'll show me some video of some group, and she says, "Are they gay?" Because you don't know anymore. And I'm saying, you're asking me? You need to tell me, are they? I don't have a clue. Or she'll be playing something with clearly gay sense, that old word we used to use, gay sensibility. But is it gay or lesbian? I mean, it might have two women, and then there might be another man. So I think that this whole, I mean, a lot of art, and especially GLBT art, has been about identity. Who am I? Who am I as this gay and lesbian person, kid? Who am I as this gay and lesbian American? And how do I fit into this bigger context of this country? What are my rights? What are my privileges? How am I being disenfranchised? How am I being... But now I think that these kids, if my kid, who is neither gay nor lesbian identified at the moment, or heterosexually identified for that matter, but how are their perceptions, which are based on this global artistic expression and outpouring that merges gay, lesbian, American, Brazilian, French, and South African, the music, the language, it's so exciting. I mean, I think that it really is exciting. And I think that whatever happens in this country, and I, along with Phil and Tori, do sense a buzz and an energy and a Pollyanna-ish rainbow happening in the next few years, not immediately, obviously, but I think that it feels like it's my responsibility, our responsibility, to get that message outside of ourselves. And I think that that's why, assimilating as a gay and lesbian or transgender person, bisexual person, has its negative aspects in my mind because I'm old. And it's difficult for me after all the years of saying these are our rights and this is who we are and we can to sort of see that we're now blending and we're now sort of, we're making this transition into the world, into the world view. These are the things that Phil and Tori said in different ways, So I have as many questions as I do answers in terms of darkness, in terms of the culture, in terms of mainstream, in terms of assimilationist, in terms of in terms of identity. I mean, I think identity is the big thing. I think it is no longer necessarily the mantle of a GLBT person to say first and foremost that that's who they are.
Well, you
they
know
may be an American first. They may be a
Right.
Democrat first. They may be a social activist first.
But you know, it doesn't go away. Identity doesn't go away. It's kind of never been, you know, people say to me, why is it that black people talk about race so much? And I said, well,
Hello.
you were the one that brought it up. And then you have to say either, no, it's not important, or yeah, I'm proud of it, or, you know, and the same thing. And certainly in this election year, we may say, oh, identity politics is over, but identity in politics does not seem to be over.
True.
It seems to be like we either, let's not talk about it because it's over, we'll pretend that it's over, or let's talk about it incessantly and pretend we're not talking about it, or, you know, whatever.
Or the issues historically, when it came to identity politics, people were elected, you know, despite their identity. And I think that an interesting thing is happening in this political season, that the excitement about the political season is because of the identity. You know, the possibility of
Exactly.
electing a woman president, the possibility of electing an African American president, the possibility, you know, of electing a Mexican American as the president, the possibility, you know, these possibilities, you know, are what driving people, and it kind of speaks to, you know, wow, you know, I can dare to dream of the America that I believed we were all along.
Well, I found when I was running that some people would say, oh, you know, big whoop, I don't want to talk about your sexual orientation. How do you feel about education? What are you going to do about health care, etc.? People in the community, though, said, how come it doesn't say lesbian on your, you know, mailer?
On your
'Cause
forehead.
Aren't you? That's a
What's
different
wrong
kind of
with you?
L, I guess. Huh? I mean, you know, because there's a certain amount of pride, there's a certain amount of, you have to deal with that, kind of. I mean, you know, when one of us runs for president, you don't think they're going to talk about it? Of course they're going to talk about it. It's going to
But
be
in order
the
for one
first
of
or
us to
whatever.
run as president, I think we have to have taken it off our forehead. So, I mean, that's the contradiction.
Yeah.
Or something. That's the confusing aspect of it. One has to be part of the whole in order to then get to the position where you're questioning it.
Well, we've certainly learned sexism isn't dead, haven't
That's
we?
right.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
None of the isms
It's
are
enough
dead.
to make me vote for Hillary 1,000 times over. It's unbelievable.
Those
Enough to
guys that
make
were
me
yelling,
cry.
those guys that were yelling, iron my shirts, iron my shirt.
I
know. my.
That's just a brilliant line on some heckler's part, wasn't it?
Unbelievable.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't know what they're yelling at Barack, but I'll bet you there's stuff at some of those
Oh.
whistle stops, or, you know, it just.
Yeah.
But we are participating. I mean, that's the interesting thing. When you said we exemplify a community that had to not be afraid. But, you know, we go back and forth too, don't you think? I mean, we kind of, like the rest of America, we can be manipulated out of fear. We can be shut up out of fear. Maybe it's a boiling frog thing, but.
Well, everybody can, but I love the idea that we're entering an era of fear fatigue and kind of, I don't know, the audacity of hope, something, you know,
Right.
embracing our higher nature, the angels of our higher nature, and sort of going. What do they say in you know, the opposite of fear is faith, or the
Or love.
or the well, the opposite of fear is probably love, but it sort of requires faith to disperse fear. And actually, I heard George Lakoff talk about the most recent brain research about the chemicals that are released when people are afraid versus the chemicals that are released when people have hope, which opens their heart, which kind of leads to love or
Expression.
and how totally different their politics are. That when people prey on fear, they will be more conservative. They will vote the. It's not necessarily a long Democrat Republican, but it's the authoritarian. You know, they will need a savior. They will give their power away. They will not come from the when they're in hope mode. They'll be more likely to be more gracious, to be more caring, to be more empathetic. He talked about empathy and empowerment, that those are the two roles that people actually Democrats or, I don't know, I don't want to, I think the categories are, when I say the institutions, I just don't mean the institutions and ideologies. I think the categories are breaking down. I think the old world is breaking down and the new one isn't born yet. And so we're in this funny in-between place, and where all we got really is faith and hope, and we got to have this generosity, because we're going to be figuring this out as we go along. We do not have canned answers anymore. I mean, we don't have communism, socialism, Marxism, feminism. We don't have any old ism, any old ism, and even, you know, liberalism, all of them, big government. I mean, none of the old answers for the kind of progressive solutions can be canned to fit this moment.
And people are celebrating that, though.
Yes.
I think that's part of the
Yes.
excitement, is that people are celebrating that. You know, and Sheila, when you talk about, you know, us being vulnerable to fear, we are vulnerable to fear. Absolutely, we all are. And the notion around the fear fatigue and kind of overcoming that is not a solid trending. No, there are peaks and valleys, if you will. And, you know, and I guess comics are on my brain these days, because there's another comic that was in the LA Times a little while ago, where there's an African American man and an African American woman, and they're sitting at the table, and the man is reading the paper, and he says, says to the woman, he says, "Wow, now a white state voted for a black candidate," and the woman says, "You mean 3% of a 98% white state voted for a 50% black man?" And so
And
they
then she
sit
leaves
and
the
they,
table. Go ahead.
right, they sit and they ponder, and she leaves the table, and he thinks to himself, "Still cool."
That's exactly right.
And you know, and that's kind of my celebration of where we are, and it's still cool, you know. And they can write Hillary off, you know, in Iowa. They can write Barack off in New Hampshire. They can write, you know, Edwards off, you know, in South Carolina. They can do whatever they want to do, but you can't unring that bell,
Still
you know,
cool.
and it's still cool.
Yeah.
Right.
It's still cool.
Well, you know, the other thing about fear and what happened, I think, with us is that as an outsider, we sought each other's kind of company. It was more of we called it a community. And the idea of a community is not necessarily shared values so much as it's just shared resources in a way. Like, we're all going to get together and march,
Right.
or we're all going to get together and open a center. You know, I mean, we came together, and we were, in many ways, a rainbow. It wasn't great at the beginning in terms of race or gender, but it got sort of better, and we became more and more proud of that as a kind of an example. And it was joyful, and we really enjoyed it. And this communal idea of shared resources is really what we need in order to support government. Because what happened, and the sort of the disconnect between, well, I'll give money to the Black AIDS Institute and I'll give money, you know, to the Liberty Hill Foundation, is people say, I don't think I want to pay any more taxes.
The answer, well, that's because the right wing for 30 years has made sure that everybody thinks that taxes are a bad thing, because government is a bad thing. I mean, it was all part of their plan to undo the New Deal and to roll back government in any progressive direction. Frankly, I think it's an outrage that there are hundreds of CEOs that make $200, $300, $400 million a year, and that there isn't a progressive tax structure. You know, I just read this report that between 2003 and 2005, the top 1% earnings increased by 42%. That is over a 2-year period by $465,000 a year in a 2-year period. That's the delta. That's the increase. And it's like, we need a new tax system, folks. And you know, at some point, people are going to start talking about it. They're not talking about it yet, but they are going to talk about it, because that's what we all give to help create a society that begins to take care of each other again. I saw this economist talk about I'm not going to say Republican anymore, I'm going to say the old conservative or right-wing approach to people is you're on your own, yo-yo. And we need to have wit. We're in this together. We are in this together. And I think that part of what's happening, and it's not going to fit neatly in any ideology, and it isn't left or right. It's kind of more like right or wrong. You know, it's back to kindergarten, where people kind of take care of each other and isolate the bully, you know, and we're going to have to institutionalize it, but it's going to mean going back to the way taxes were in the 50s and 60s, where the top 1% paid 60%, folks, where corporations paid 70%.
Part of their income over a certain amount, not over the whole thing.
Progressive tax structure. So I know that has nothing to do with LGBT issues, but we have so starved government. Government is the primary engine of redistribution of economic opportunity in this country,
But
and
you know,
it has
maybe
been.
It does have to do with LGBT issues and all nonprofit issues. I mean, where do we get our money for nonprofit?
65% from government.
Yeah, but we ask rich people. I mean,
Well,
they are not the only people that give, but we're saying to them, and you know, even at Liberty Hill, they're training their children, right? The families are saying to their children, to, you know, not
But
tithing
all the
exactly,
private-
But give.
It's an important
And
thing.
where is the arts funding? I mean,
yeah.
let's look at that issue.
Not coming from government.
Well, exactly, and that has been so contingent upon our growth as a, you know, as a community.
But this
But if we circle back to where we started, I think that what just happened is important, because I agree with you, Sheila, that Tori, what you just said is an LGBT issue. Front and center is an LGBT issue, and it's problematic, you know, if we think that it isn't. And I think that is part of the challenge in our ability to come home, you know, because if you come home, you know, part of that is not just the privilege of opening the door and being able to walk in, it's the responsibility. You know, and so when you come home, every part of being in that home is a part of your responsibility. You know, it's not just what goes on in your bedroom, it's also making sure that the plumbing works and the garbage is taken out and the dog is walked and all those
And the
things,
neighbors,
you know.
right,
and
exactly.
so whether you ever mention LGBT, you know, in the context of government or freedom or responsibility or whatever, all of these are LGBT issues. And that's a part of, if you will, I think the reality of this kind of post-gay period in our lives, that we are beginning to mature and to understand all of it. And where it kind of really hits home is, you know, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when we decided that we were going to become parents. Now, you really learn, you know, that all of it is about you, you know, because when the algebra and the science and the geometry and whether there are school uniforms or what's the lunch program is,
Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance, or all of these things that we never thought about as being our issues, they become front and center, you know, and so. No, where we weigh in on the starving of government is as much an LGBT issue as whether or not there's gay marriage or not.
Well,
Also, I mean, the word, I don't think we've used that, but it's also sort of a spiritual and moral high ground. And I would like to think that we have opened some of those doors. And, you know, this is my theme, and I will repeat it, and I will continue to cling to it, but I think that HIV/AIDS is the devastation of that is one of the reasons that taught us as a community to go into a stratosphere that was morally right. When we were visiting those bedsides, watching those people die, who are still dying, crossing colored lines, crossing gender lines, when lesbians who were nurses and came to the gay men's bedsides, literally and figuratively. I mean, I think that at that point we started gaining some kind of moral fiber. And I think that that's, you know, I think that we've been forerunners in many respects in that way.
we embraced a culture of care,
Right.
as opposed to just a culture of
absolutely.
whatever, success or individual
Absolutely.
rights even.
Or me.
Right, a culture of,
It's huge.
I think that's right. I think at least it gave us another tool in the me
Absolutely.
times, because, you know, we just me is
well, it became
many
us.
of the other people, I think, in some ways, but we had each other. I mean, it was a very interesting thing for me, because when the Black Civil Rights Movement began, of course, I wasn't Black, and therefore I wasn't in the movement, but it touched me so deeply that I wanted to be in it. You know, I wanted to be in it, not because it looked easy, not because people weren't dying, but because they were caring for each other so much. And they had something that looked like family to me. Now, I had a family, I love my family,
Beloved
but I wasn't,
community.
you know, with it. And when things started happening and we started recognizing that women maybe weren't equal, I couldn't see that right away. And when I did see it, it just hit me like a ton of bricks that I was suddenly in something, not just helping something. But it wasn't until the LGBT movement that I really felt this kind of family really.
After you came out on Geraldo?
After I came out of Geraldo.
Well, it's a great moment in gay history.
May his soul rest in peace. It was a great moment, but it was a much greater moment for me than it was for America. I mean, you know, it was.
Well, always.
I don't know. I mean, I know you all because of that, and we share so much in common. And I think what is happening in America is that people are grasping to find how they share these things. If you watch the Iowa caucuses, you know, they televised them, and you watch these people kind of talking to each other.
It was fun to watch, actually.
Oh my gosh, it was great.
It was really
Well,
cool. I never
human.
knew what they did.
There's something human going on.
Right.
And
Did you ever know what an Iowa caucus
No,
was
I
like?
didn't.
It was really fun to have C-SPAN there. It was the first time ever. And in fact, the coverage of this election year, I mean, to some extent, it's kind of ridiculous, but 3 C-SPAN channels.
Not for us.
3 different C-SPAN channels of the Iowa caucuses, or 2 at least.
And you can get them mobile too, you know. So you
I
can
know,
just-
and then there's all those the internet coverage,
Right.
but it's all part of it. I mean, it's probably the first, if we're right, if our gut is right, that there's an awakening of a new spirit, a new energy, a new hopeful energy for change that doesn't have an ideology name, that doesn't have, and it seems to be attached to different candidates. I mean, this is before the November election, so, and people are feeling some of the, if we're right, that a great new rising up of hope is happening in this country that could become a social movement. It might not. It might be an election year blip, but it could become something greater than that. It could become a force outside. You know, I believe social movements make history, not individuals. I'm not, but it's the combination. John Kennedy had to be there to give the wind to the sails of a civil rights movement that already existed and to make it become a mass movement. It's a combination of the political space that's opened by a great leader or a leader that's in the right moment and says at the right time, and the social movement that comes up that's already been in the works, doesn't come out of the air, you know. But if we're right, and we are in a moment of the beginning of a new American movement, of some kind of, maybe a new global movement, because Lord knows it's not going to be the same. Just like the new left wasn't what the old left, just like the civil rights movement wasn't what the labor movement looked like, and it was different players, and it was a completely different culture. And you can't kind of predict or name or box up. But if we're right, and there's the beginning of something happening, it's going to be internet. Do you remember when we had those anti-war demonstrations on February 15th of 2003? The anti-war
all
movement
internet.
that didn't work, didn't stop the war, but there were like 15 million people across. And the next day, we just watched these pictures on the internet, and we
Well, that's
watched.
it.
Right.
The
That's-
technology
it is
is
the
allowing
communication.
us.
Technology will echo it and make it, I don't know, more powerful
Resound.
or more objectified, both. I mean, there's downsides to it too. You can live through technology and not be
Well,
actually
but I mean,
doing
people
it yourself.
crossing. I saw a lot more volunteers, probably starting with the Kerry campaign, as I really noticed, where a lot of just regular people were leaving their homes and going to other states. And I know this has happened with, you know, political junkies, but it just seemed like there were a lot of people,
Oh yeah.
you know.
Where
And
we were in Albuquerque I'll never forget it. I was marching like with some of the groups, I'm forgetting some of the election protection, smaller groups, but then one day, then Americans coming together, and then the Kerry campaign. And in every single place when you would go to gather, there was a total mix, and there were queers everywhere. There wasn't one place where there were not openly gay people or people who were not afraid of acting openly gay. And then there were people who, you know, white working class people who were living in the trailer park, and there were Latino people who were working as janitors. I mean, I'd never seen anything. This was Albuquerque, and I'd never seen on an election anything like it. I'd never seen such diversity. But see, we're standing on those shoulders. This election year is standing on 4 years ago, and on 4 years after 2000, so disillusioned so many people, and people started widespread. I was just talking to the head of the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, Los Angeles, Angelica Salas, they have registered 50,000 people in the last 6 months, new citizens. You know, they go to the big convention center and they sign people up and they register them to vote. Now, they're not registering, it's nonpartisan.
Right.
But one's assumption is that most new voters, or the non-voter, the single, poor, young, single woman, immigrant voter is going to vote the right way.
Well, I guess we'll see, won't we?
We sure will.
So do you think it's going to make a difference in, and I'm not talking about who wins the election, I'm talking, because that, of course, is going to make a difference. But in terms of people's participation, I mean, I don't know whether it's Pollyannish or whether it's just optimistic. I mean, I think optimism is perfectly supportable and kind of a good way to go. I also think it's good for your health, frankly. But do you think, I don't feel you started to say something a couple of minutes ago, but do you think it's going to make a difference in the way, just in the way we sort of approach our lives and, I don't know, how we are?
I definitely think it will. I think it already has begun to happen. You know, the Black Youth Institute is a very small organization, and we're not large enough to have like a volunteer director or volunteer coordinator. But you know, last week, you know, we had a volunteer just walk in our door and said, I want to volunteer. Today we had a staff meeting, and I realized that we have a small staff, there's 14 people on staff, and I realized that 3 of the people on my staff started as volunteers. You know, and people are just starting to say, you know, not only can I make a difference, but I have to.
It's back to what you said about the art of the world of our day being so dark. I mean, how can America not reflect these dark 8 years almost that we've lived in? This utter sense of futility and powerlessness and hopelessness. How can that not take hold of us, you know, collectively? It just has. You know, you see it on people's faces, disillusionment and anger, the level of anger and rage at the machine that we can't seem to get our claws in to make any progress or change. And I think now you're seeing people that are lighter. I mean, there just seems to be a lightness of being based on the fact that maybe things are going to change.
Let's hope it's not unbearable.
Right. Oh, yeah, yes, exactly. Yes, we want a bearable.
A bearable lightness of being.
That's right.
Well, you know, on this artistic thing, again, I mean, I'm going to go back to the notion that the mainstream, the words aren't ever quite working, by the way. It's interesting how hard it is when you're in process, that my experience is when you're in sort of creative process, you know, that's...
You mean like the country is in now?
Yeah. That part of it is that none of the words are quite right. But but so on the art front, what I said about the old institutions, kind of things are exploding out of them. The mainstream institutions can't quite capture the new energy. There isn't quite the right words. We don't have the discourse yet. We're framing, we're reframing everything. We haven't quite found and the arts front, I don't know about you guys, but there's unbelievable art stuff happening. I mean, the performance art, the poetry slams, the stuff that you see the kids writing in, you know, juvenile detention, the creative programs. There is a creativity that exists. I go to a little local coffee house for, you know, I stop by there regularly, and they have these. I mean, these kids are unbelievable. These young people are unbelievable, and the murals and I don't know. I feel as if it's mainstream cultural art that's kind of narrow and dark and angry. But there is something happening in wherever there are, and we don't have the same counterculture. We had a counterculture in the 70s, and the gay community created an alternative counterculture, if you will, when we had highways and during the AIDS epidemic, we had unbelievable, you know,
outpourings.
Michael Kearns, right?
Your art hasn't stopped. You have less of an outlet for it and less of an audience for it, but you haven't stopped creating it. And there's other people coming up behind you.
You're really right, and we're of a certain age where we're not doing what Michael said. I mean, I'm not looking at everything on YouTube and trying to.
I'm trying to.
I do see, you know, most visited sites.
Right.
And that, you're right, in a way, it's not
the laughing baby.
It's not happy-go-lucky, but there is enormous creativity, and I think optimism as well. And social critique.
Yeah.
I mean, so much
Such
critique
in
in all
an
of these places.
entertaining, funny, flamboyant way. I mean, art and creativity has always been the antidote to bad politics.
Well, and
I mean,
also,
it's always been a way to respond viscerally to injustice.
which is why bad politics wants to
squelch
control art,
squelch
squelch
it,
art, and
no
certainly not
question
let
at
any
all
kids study
whatsoever,
any of that,
especially
you know.
queer art, AIDS art.
Well, they don't want it to be taught in those schools because creativity creates independent thinking.
Right, which is exactly like the school that Tia goes to is all about art and creative, creativity and critical thinking, and but that's the opposite of most the schools.
So I predict next year when we do this show, because you always in January,
Always bring you
February,
guys
March,
together, right.
You always bring us together in the beginning. So
Yeah,
I
let's
predict
predict
in
for next year.
2009 that we're going to be having a conversation that will be extremely, well, we're already excited, and it's only just being born. But you can sense things sometimes in the air, and it's so funny because we haven't seen each other for months.
And we're on the same page.
And we're feeling it, right? We're each feeling this kind of sense, and you see it in the election, the people who are going to work, the young people that are volunteering, and the 18. One of my mentees, who's a sophomore at Harvard, who is an Obama maniac, who was shocked, I have to tell you, that I was even considering voting for Hillary. She just says, "No, you're just so." I said, "What? Say it, old." But at any rate,
Go iron
she
some
was
shirts.
just like, I mean, it was kind of like I could see that I just fell off the pedestal. I could just see it the moment I fell off the
Crumbling.
pedestal. Right? But anyway, I mean, I just, just that she was taking couple of weeks off from school, but not just her, but like hundreds of people were going to New Hampshire from, Harvard and.
But how do you keep them from being disappointed in 2009, no matter who wins? I mean, one of the things that I remember about being young is that we put a lot of faith in a lot of things, which inevitably, in some way, would let us down.
It would be great if, in part of this excitement, that we were able to communicate that, as Tori said earlier, it's not about the individual, that the change is not really about the possibility of this particular class of presidential candidates. The change is about us, because we are what makes that possible. And if we can embrace how we've changed, then we can't be disappointed about that outcome, because we will continue to change. And that's what I'm excited about. I sat down deliberately with my nephew to watch the speeches after Iowa, and because I wanted to share that time with him, and for us to have that experience before people started to try to take it away, to say, for this hour and a half, we're going to be in this place, and no matter what they do after that, they can't take that time away from us.
And it just grows and grows and grows, I think. I mean, it's interesting to me how much we can see of this presidential race. It just seems, people say, oh, overkill, it's on all the time. I think that's great.
I do too.
I think it's
Totally.
great. You're going to vote for somebody? Let's have a whole
No
lot
one.
of them to look at. Let's look at all of them. Let's look at all of them in every context. I hated the way it used to be so manipulated. You'd see a moment here and a moment there. And that's the other thing with the internet. Did you miss the speech? Hey,
You'll see it
call it
tonight.
up. Right, exactly.
Well, but we do have an infrastructure for a. I'm a 60s person. I talk about social movements. They may call it something else by the time 2009's around, but we do have an infrastructure. We have a lot of organizations. We have a lot of community-based organizations, not just LGBT, but in different communities. And even though they're underfunded, and even though when you run one of them, you have to spend all your time just building your institution, there is think of it as a groundwork, as a network, as an infrastructure for the next great social movement, whether there's churches or synagogues that have a progressive, focus, or temples, mosques. Think of it as the nonprofit sector. I believe there's kind of stealth people in every institution, and I think people are gonna kind of break out of them or use them. You need to have organization in order to build movement. And I think we have it. They'll just transform from just doing this service or just advocating for this policy to suddenly, just like that Rolodex, created a Montgomery bus boycott out of, just instead of just getting people to the church basement to the NAACP chapter, it became the basis of a movement. Those infrastructures, when the time is right, they will be put in service of something greater. We don't know exactly what it'll look like because nobody ever does before it happens. But that's what we've been building in our relationships, through the trust, through the internet, to some of the blogs. But it's not just that. It's not just talking, and it's the current, it's the relationships, and it's the organization.
Well, and the models that we get from people, whether they're the candidates or people speaking for the candidates or people talking about this election, to say we must care about each other. I mean, there's a lot of that message, which I think is enormously important for America right at this moment, because as you said, Tori, the message has been every man for himself, I mean,
you're on your own.
You're on your
worse,
own.
Actually, worse. It's worse than every man for himself or every woman for herself. It's actually turn against your neighbor.
Right.
Right.
It's turn against your neighbor.
And it's that fear, fear, fear. You have to be afraid of everything and everybody, and your instinct and your basic goodness to love your neighbor, take care of people, all those things that finally, it looks like that may be part of the platform.
Well, it's interesting you put those two things together, because it's like losing the fear of reaching out and taking care, or
your community,
being part of a community, which we kind of model. I'm not saying we're perfect, but we were kind of forced into it because nobody wanted to talk to us or take care of us, and so it was like
exacerbated
we had to do that
during the AIDS years. And
well, we only have 2 minutes left. Do you want to make a wish for the year? I mean, we've sort of done a lot of it, but
I want to remain Pollyanna. I want the Pollyanna
I want
Award.
You too, Mike.
Well, Maya Angelou said, "When we know better, we do better," and I want us to know better.
Tor.
Does Revolution Now do it? Marian Wright Edelman talks about a revolution in values in this country, and that's what I think we need.
Revolution in values. I like that. Well, I guess if I were going to make it's not a wish, it's really more of a plan, because I think we are acting what we're saying, and so many people we know are, that it would be, reaching for our higher selves, or being not just the country that we want the country to be, but being the person that we want to be, which is what will make the country be what it wants to be. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. I hope it makes sense to you, because we've come to the end of our time. So I want to thank my guests so much. Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Michael. Whenever I think of doing a show, I think I have no idea what the show's going to be about. I'll get these 3 people together, and there'll be, a talk about the big issues of the time. So I just want you to participate, hope. Yeah, hope. Get used to it.